Hello, welcome to COM110, and we are into chapter one now. So, this is going to be the introduction to human communication, and you should have access on Canvas to these slides. However, I think that on these videos that I'm going to be sharing with you all, I like to kind of share and look at it with you as we're going along. And so I hope this works out for you. If it doesn't, please let me know. I want to make sure that our class works for everybody in here. But chapter one, Intro to Human Communication, it's a basic chapter kind of talking about why communication, what is it? I know how to talk to people. I don't need to take a class. But something that I learned throughout my studies is that the more I get into it, I realize like I'm a really bad communicator. Even when I'm trying to be a good one, sometimes I'm just distracted, thinking about other things, and I don't realize if I'm being rude. And so, getting into chapter one, I want us to get into what interpersonal communication is about. Now, yeah, this chapter we are going to talk about other communication aspects. I always think about like the umbrella of communication. We focus on one thing, interpersonal. And so, with interpersonal, I want you to think first off, you got to think about the number of people involved that you're talking to in a moment. When I go and I visit my parents and I sit with my mom, I think, hey, it's just me and her. We're able to talk, we're able to chit chat. Now we get into number two here on the slide that says the physical proximity of the communicators. That's how like physically close we are. Now I can easily call my mom. I live in Arcadia. She lives in Peoria. So it's about like a 30-minute drive. But thinking, hey, if I have something serious I want to talk to her about, it might be better to do it like in person, so we're physically close. Or if I'm having a bad day and I just want to call her really quickly, it's amazing how I can like bring her into my space. She's like not actually here. You also want to think about the nature of the interaction and how it like unites those people. So, are we hanging out, my friends together Friday night around bonfire? We're planning on hanging out and being there, or did it just like naturally happen? We all showed up at the same restaurant around the same time, and now we're hanging out. Like those unplanned hangouts. I think those sometimes are the best ones. And then sometimes when you plan something, it's not as good, but it depends on your interpersonal communication with them. And then you want to think about the degree of formality and the structure. So I think a great example, I'm going to be looking at my book for this one, is thinking about when you talk to your friend. The way I talk to my friend, oh, this was my week. I had a really tough week. Maybe I was busy. Maybe I wasn't able to clean my apartment or meal prep the way I wanted to. But then I see my boss and I might say, like, it was the best week ever, right? So thinking about the formalness of talking to someone in power versus talking to someone who's just my friend. I know that a lot of times I ask my students, do you talk to your grandma the same way that you talk to your best friend? If not, which probably not, it's because of the degree of formality here. What you feel comfortable sharing, what you don't feel. I know, and you're going to learn from me in this class, I'm very, very close to my parents. Now, do I talk to them about 100% what's going on in my life? No, that'd be weird. But I do talk to them about a lot that my other friends, they might think is weird. So it just kind of depends on your closeness with others, what works for you, what doesn't work for you, and then also with the other person. So, reasons to study communication. Why should I study it? First off, it's going to give you a new perspective on something that we take for granted for every single day. And we wake up, maybe we look at TikTok right away. Well, it might not be around forever anymore, right? But I know I wake up, I look at TikTok, and then I start communicating by sending TikToks to my friends. Then I get ready for school. I go to work and I see people in the hallway that I work with that I'm excited to talk to about classes. And then I see my boss and then I want to talk to him and I want to figure out what can we do for the department. Then maybe I'm texting my partner and I'm asking him, what should we have for dinner tonight? What should we do for dinner? I'm also texting my mom, and she's always sending me Instagram reels, and I love that. And then I know that when I call my dad, it's like serious business. Like, Dad, I need help. And so thinking about reasons to study communication, this new perspective of like, well, what's going on in all of their lives, right? I text all my friends, and maybe they're not in a very good mental space at that moment. Maybe they're really stressed out from school or work. Maybe they're having some issues at home. And then here I am, kind of like in their face with news. So, thinking about the perspective of, pause for a moment and make sure other people are in a right mindset to talk to me about something. So when I study communication, I'm able to be mindful of that. We can also think too, and I love this, it says, we base a large quantity of our time devoted to communicating. I mean, the example I gave to you of my morning, I communicated to so many people, right? And so thinking about all the people I communicate with versus, the rot days when you stay at home and you don't do anything, you're watching Netflix all day and you're not communicating to anybody, do you feel really great at the end of the day? Maybe you do after the end of one day, right? But then after like 2 days or 3 days of it, it gets to you. I like to remember during the COVID times where we were all quarantined at home, none of us could really leave. That's what got to us so quickly is how are we going to communicate? It has to shift towards Zoom. It has to shift towards, Skype or just texting or talking on the phone. And so that large quantity of communicating had to be adapted in a different way. Of course, this last reason is we want to increase our effectiveness. We want to be better communicators. I know that we all want to be to some degree. It can help us with our relationships. It can help us have more satisfying relationships, friends, family, romantic partners, workplace, all of the above, right? And so this is going to help us be able to express how we're feeling and to have good intentions with others. And so I think this is a great reason to study communication. Now, there's four different needs as to why we need to communicate. And so the first one is going to be physical, and there is so much research about how communicating is linked towards our mental health, it's linked towards our physical health. And so thinking that we're able to get something like off our chest. I know that our chapter, it talks about bottling up these emotions, thoughts, feelings, all of that, and that it can be really bad for us. And so when we're able to communicate these things, we can kind of watch out when we're experiencing stress, anxiety, depression, cancer, heart problems, common cold. Communication can help with all of these things. And it seems kind of silly, like, how does that happen? Well, it happens because we're able to talk to people like, hey, I'm stressed out about the beginning of the semester. So it's nice to get it off your chest. You can hear about what other people have to say. Maybe they can get your mind distracted on something else. And so you're able to have those relationships. Now, communication needs also focuses on our identity. I really like this because we can discover who we are through influences in our life. And so I think a major influence in my life has always been my parents. They've always been around. They've always been supportive in my life. They've been major key players here. And so they're able to identify me and trying to say hey, you are smart, you are important, all of that. And then it makes me feel smart and important. And so thinking about those influences, thinking about the friends that I hang out with who uplift me, who make me feel good. Versus if I hung out with a friend who did not make me feel good, they told me, oh, you're so messy all the time. You're so mean all the time. You're so needy. Those words are going to seep in. I'm gonna think to myself, I'm messy, I'm needy, I'm not a good person. And so that's gonna really impact my identity in a negative way. We also have now social, which this is through establishing relationships, maintaining them. So you start them, you have them, but then even ending them, you have to think about that. Communication is involved in all of these. Now, think about some friends you have in your life who maybe you haven't talked to for a while, and so it's kind of hard to maintain that relationship. And then when you start communicating back up again, you kind of have that awkward conversation of where have you been? Or I've been so busy. And so you have to have those excuses ready. But when you're able to be social with them, you're able to maintain those relationships and You're able to grow them. The more you talk, the more you get to know each other, and then the stronger you become. Now, our last need for communication, it's the practical stuff. I look at this as like the everyday stuff, right? It's doing oriented. I go to a coffee shop and it's a practical need because I go up there and I start talking to them about what I want in my coffee, right? I can also think about operating daily tasks. This is really big in like the workplace. How am I going to get stuff done? How am I going to get stuff done at work, school? And then I like this. It's essential for marriage longevity. Now, when you're with someone, long-term commitment, a lot of times, and we're going to get into this in the later chapters, but romantic relationships, you need to continue to talk to them because it's practical in the sense that together you're working on making this marriage work. You need to talk. You need to ask, how was your day? But then also get a little deeper into that than, oh, it was good. We'll get much more into that the later. So let's see. This is our definition of communication. Now I'm going to tell you, I'm going to give you a little peek. The communication scholarly world has a very difficult time in trying to find one definition for the word communication. So if you look at various textbooks, they're always going to be a little bit the same, but a little bit different. And the major keywords here you're going to see that are the same is that it's a process. Communication is a process by which we share ideas, meanings, information, messages with other people. It always has to be with other people in trying to get that message across. You can voice communicate messages, but you can also use nonverbal communication. That's like your eyes, facial expressions, hand gestures, movements. I want you to think about the people you know very well in your life and how you're able to like physically read them really well. That's nonverbal communication. Now, communication, it is also going to be symbolic. What this means is that it's a mark, object, sign, and like everybody knows what that means. So I want you to think, for example, a stop sign when you're driving. We all know that it means you gotta stop, right? Now, my next example for you, it's always my favorite one. When I moved to Arizona from California, I noticed driving's a little different here. And so when we see the stop lights, green means go. Everybody's going, it's fine. And then yellow, what does yellow mean to you? I want to pause and let you think about this for a second. When I think about yellow, I think that you're supposed to start slowing down, right? Because it's going to turn to red. So you start slowing down. However, I've noticed yellow here means I gotta go through it quickly, right? And so people drive faster through yellow and then it hits red. And a lot of times people run a red light because they're already driving so fast. But these symbols, we have different interpretations of them. That's another big word we're going to be using. So, how do you interpret a yellow stoplight? Now, my last one here is that communication is a shared meaning. So it means that, in California, when people saw yellow, our shared meaning was, hey, we're going to slow down. But in Arizona, it was like, hey, I'm going to go faster. I got to get through it. Now, I know that a lot of people, they might differ from that, and that's totally fine. Different interpretations. But these different shared meanings, we also have these specific definitions. So I love these two, and I have a great example for you. The denotative definitions. These are dictionary type definitions. So I want you to imagine a rose bush. It's a big bush. It has red flowers all over. And so when I look up rose bush, I'm going to see that it's going to say it's a plant, it's a shrub, it has thorns, it can have red flowers, red roses, white roses, anything like that. And so, generally speaking, it's like, I know what that means. But then we get into the connotative definition, and this one is like the meaning behind the thing. It says here emotions or associations that we make when we're exposed to a symbol. So if someone gives you red roses, what do you feel? You're like, oh, I'm so loved. They like me so much. I'm not thinking like this is from a bush that has shrubs and it has thorns and it's gonna hurt if I touch them. Nothing like that. It's gonna symbol love to me, right? Now, if you look it up a little bit deeper, there's different meanings for different colors of roses that people give you. So, like red means love. I think pink means like liking someone. White can also mean like a marriage or also a funeral or like a eulogy, which is kind of funny to think about. All these different definitions. But our society, they come up with these different definitions. So, thinking a little bit deeper, we're really going to be focusing on the definition of communication for this one. The dimensions of communication. So, when I'm talking to someone, I got to think about these two different things every time. That's the relationship I have with the person, but it's also the content of like what I'm going to talk to this person about. So, give me 1 second. And so, thinking about the relationship, this is going to determine how likely you are to interpret that message. So, again, my mom, I'm very close to her. I know her very well. And so I'm able to have a pretty good relationship, which means pretty good communication with her. I can kind of like understand what's going to happen. Now, it doesn't mean that I can predict our communication every time. No, but it does help with thinking, how am I going to address this situation? Now, I want you to think, I have this example here for you. Someone says, I need to see you now. Now, think about if your boss said that. I need to see you now. You think about the relationship you have with them. It could be good or bad, but just the power role of boss to employee. When your boss says that to you, you get a little nervous. You think like, oh gosh, I need to go see them right now. This could be serious. What's going to happen? My immediate thought, I'm a millennial. If a boss tells me I need to see you now, I'm immediately fired, right? And so I think about if my romantic partner told me I need to see you now, I feel like, oh, like, is everything okay? I get concerned, but I don't feel so like I'm fired, right? I feel like what's going on, right? And then if my best friend told me this, I need to see you now, I start thinking about like, what do you have to tell me? What gossip are you going to share with me? What's going on? There's different context to all of this, but I just think that having the same message from different people in our lives, it's based off of that relationship. Now, you can then think about the content. So that's the information that we're sharing with each other. When I talk to my boss after I go and see them right away, and maybe they just want to say, hey, you did a good job this week. They just wanted to, give me a compliment. That makes me feel good. That's the content of the message. And then that's it. I do want you to think a lot of interpretations, they can occur during this time. When you're listening to a message, it's like, what's being told here to me? What do I need to understand? Things like that. And so the better relationship you have with this person, or you understand the roles you have, then you're able to understand that message and it's going to be effective and competent for everybody. Now, I use this definition as let me start over. I use this example to talk about the definition of a situationship. I want you to think about romantic relationships, situationships. You're hanging out with someone and you don't know what you are. Are you dating? Are you exclusive? All of that. And so every time you hang out with this person, when you're interpreting the message, the content, it can get kind of confusing sometimes. Maybe they get upset that you go and you hang out with friends without them, or maybe you hang out with friends and you didn't tell them about it. And it's like, well, we're not dating. I don't need to tell you everything about my life. But then maybe they go on a date with someone else and you get upset. You interpret that as like they're seeing other people. You can see and feel the like messiness that could happen here, right? And so that's why with the content and the relationship dimensions, they both come hand in hand and having good, effective, communication. Now back to like the basic principles again, talking about how, the symbols of communication, all of that. Communication, it is a process. We are like always, always constantly communicating. And so it's ongoing, it's dynamic, and it's going to change. I want you to think about your relationship with like your best friend. The first time you met, you had to get to know each other. And so then the more you started hanging out with them, you got to know them a little bit more, you had more laughs. And then now you've been friends for a couple of years and you can say confidently, like, they're my best friend, right? And so this example of inside jokes. They didn't start at the beginning of your friendship, gradually happens over time. And so, through the process of communicating with each other, this is always going to be changing with your relationships. And so, you want to think of it as a series of ongoing interactions. This one's really big, and we have an entire class here dedicated to intercultural communication. And it's that communication is culturally determined. I want you to think about your culture and think about the group of people that you grew up with, you were born into, how you all learn and share the same. And I have this list here of beliefs, values, norms, rules, how that was like governed into you. And a lot of it does have to deal with your own religion as well, but we're not going to get into that too much. But culture is something that we learn. So when we have our culture, that's totally going to be embedded into the way that I communicate with others. And then I want you to think about when you meet other people outside of your culture, how is that going to work out? Are you going to be open minded and able to talk to them and communicate with them? Or are there going to be some struggles and some kind of room for comprehension of what's going on here? It says we got to understand how to interact with other people outside of our cultures. And that's only going to make us better communicators and better human beings. Now, the last thing I'm going to talk to you about for this chapter is communication competence. I actually love this key term. And this key term, your book says here from Brian Spitzberg, 2000. And Dr. Spitzberg was one of my teachers at San Diego State University, and he was really, really big on communication competence. And what this means is that you need to be both appropriate and then effective in your communication styles. Appropriate in the way of if you are at work and let's say you just got broken up with the night before, you're at work and people ask you, oh, how's it going? And you just kind of like break down. You start crying, you start saying how your ex partner ruined your life and you're like emotionally upset. That's not really appropriate for the environment you're in, right? You can say, like, hey, I'm not doing so good, and kind of like move on. Now, we also want to be effective in our communication. So being sure that, we understand each other. Effective in the sense of like, I'm talking to you and I put my phone away. I don't have my phone here. But if we're talking to each other and you're sharing with me your recent breakup, I'm like, oh, that sucks. I'm sorry. I'm not being very effective. Now, to be communicative and to have communication competence, you need both. This is so, so huge. You need to be both appropriate and effective. Please, please remember that. That's really big in this. So, with the characteristics of competence, you want to think, how can I use my skill set here? If you apply for like any job, you're going to see that communication skills, it's up there. It's usually one of the first ones, the like traits and skills that people are looking for. So with being skillful, you want to think about those situational cues that happen. Thinking about, how can I approach this the best way? So let's say that you want to ask for a raise at your job. The skillfulness of like, when should I ask my boss? Should I ask them Monday morning or Friday around 4 p.m.? Now you might think the skills of like Friday 4 p.m., they're probably already clocked out, but it's a good time to talk about it because you can talk about your relationship with them and the company, so they can think about it on the weekend. Now, Monday morning isn't a good time to talk about it because it's the beginning of the work week. Let's go in, but then it might be bad because they're thinking about other things, right? Now, this is where you got to be adaptable. This is a second characteristic. And thinking about how you can adapt your message so that people can understand you. It says here, thinking about, okay, if I'm going to give a presentation and my PowerPoint doesn't work anymore, can I still give it? And hopefully you can, right? Thinking of adapting to what's going on around you so that people can still receive your message. Now, the third one here, it says involved. And it's thinking about how you can get your audience involved, how you can get maybe not just your audience, but the listeners into your message. That's good communication if they're there and if they're able to communicate with you. It says here that you want to be sure that you can get people excited because they understand your message. And now politicians love to do this. They want to get their audience involved. They want to get their supporters involved because everyone's on the same page. We can go and change the world. Now, in order to do that, number four, you got to understand your audience. Now, again, I want you to envision with me. I don't want to talk too much about politics, but it's always a great example with communication. Thinking about when there is a presidential race, we just had one not too long ago, and the parties have townhouses where they go and then they have probably a small group around them, 50 or less people, right? And they're able to see and talk to people. They're able to say, like, hey, I was there too. I couldn't afford eggs, and you're able to make that like interpersonalness in a sense. Now, when you're able to understand your audience, you're able to adapt your message, and people are going to like you that much more. Now, our fourth one here is cognitive complexity. And this is thinking about how are you going to like show affection? How are you going to understand emotions, right? When someone is standing in front of you, a close friend, and they're crying to you, how are you going to share this space with them? Are you going to be like, oh, that sucks. Sorry. Good luck. Right? Or are you going to really empathize with them? It says here thinking about sympathy versus empathy and just like understanding those emotions that are happening. Now, this last one, it's actually one of my favorite ones, and it's self-monitoring. So this deals with I got a lot of emotions happening right now. So, do I want to express them all? Or am I going to think about the environment I'm in and think, hey, maybe I shouldn't, right? And so self-monitoring, it's known to just focus on your behavior and your emotions. Can you kind of put a mask on in a sense and just get on with the day? Now we have two key terms here that I would love for you to know, and it's low self-monitoring and high self-monitoring. So I'm going to look at my books. I can tell you the exact definitions of them. But if you have a high self-monitoring skill, high, this means that you will, if you could have a high self-monitor, pay attention to every little thing. You think about how you're standing. You think about where your eyes moving. It also says maybe even how you breathe. High self-monitoring means I am very aware of everything I'm doing right now. You might think about it, a job interview. You are going to be high self-monitoring because you go in and you take note about how you're sitting, maybe where you put your water bottle. You take note of like totally putting your phone away. Everything is a choice that you are making. Whereas low self-monitoring, again, it says here that you don't give any thought to anything like that. You maybe are just talking about your feelings all the time. You have no filter, right? And so you can see how when you're around people that you're close to, you might have a low self monitor. You feel in a safe space. You don't have to have a filter and you're talking to them. But then also, as you involve more people into your life, you start to monitor like what's appropriate here. And I'm going to go back to the last slide. What's appropriate here in this relationship and what's going to be effective in our communicating styles with one another. So please remember low and high self monitoring. This is something that I really love, and it's the types of human communication. So this is going to be dealing with your journal, I believe. And these are five different types of communication studies that people have in community colleges and even other universities. And so we have this first one. Let me just check the name of class. Perfect. You can see this kind of pyramid. And so this first one is intrapersonal communication. This one really refers to the self-talk in your mind. Do you ever think to yourself when you're thinking about things? Maybe you're thinking about yourself or your mind. You're thinking about like, what am I going to have for dinner? Maybe you get on the freeway and you're kind of singing the songs in your mind, and then all of a sudden you start thinking about something else, right? Intrapersonal, That's just you. No one else is involved. Now, there's a lot of research about how intrapersonal communication, the way we talk to ourselves, can greatly impact our self worth, our self esteem. And so you need to think about intra communication as a relationship. You got to be kind to yourself. Now, we have interpersonal communication. That's what this whole class is about. We are going to be focusing on messages between two people, usually. It's a dyad, that's also known as dyadic communication. And so you can think about your friends, family, romantic partners, work, going to a coffee shop, going to a restaurant, talking to your teachers, interpersonal, they know you to some degree. Then we have a small group. And I love this because it's between 3 to 15 people. This is actually really big. Now you're all working together, you have a common goal. And so I want you to think about a small group that you've worked with in school before. You have a goal of doing well in the class, right? You have a goal of doing well on the project. Maybe you hang out with your friends and it's a group of 6 of you. Your goal is to enjoy your evening, enjoy your time together. Now, the thing about small groups is, I want you to vision, and this often happens to me a lot. If I'm in a group with 6 people, we're all kind of hanging out talking. Sometimes I tend to kind of stand outside of the group. Maybe it's just a lot of communication happening at once. Maybe I kind of just like drift away. I start having my own intra communication here. And so that's why with a small group, it cannot be more than 15 because we have the drifters. We have the people that kind of get distracted by things. How many conversations can essentially happen in a group of 6, in a group of 15, right? And so that's why it needs to be like manageable, right? The conversation. Now, if it's more than 15, we're leaking into public communication. This one is when like one person, or it could be a group of individuals, they're sending out a specific message to an audience. Public speaking is a great example here. I really encourage you all to take a public speaking class here at Scottsdale Community College. This is where we learn how to speak in front of an audience effectively, how to inform them and persuade them. And so you have that purpose. But thinking about public communication here again, they're not really able to give you a ton of feedback, right? Now, in a small group, they're able to read people. And in public communication, maybe in a public communication class, you're able to kind of read the audience, but there's a lot of people there. Now, this last one is mediated communication. If you love technology, if you love apps, TikTok, Instagram, all of that, I don't want to say Twitter anymore, X, I guess. This is a form of some technology. You send out a message, who knows how many people are going to see it, right? I have to laugh because your book says 2 or more people. And it's like, yeah, you might make a TikTok and post it, and maybe only you and your mom sees it, right? But then the next day you do it, and then all of a sudden it's viral. And it's like, how did that happen, right? This mediated communication, it's something, technology, right? The TikTok, that you're talking to other people. Sweet. That was chapter 1. I would normally have this time for questions, but if you have any questions, please let me know. I hope you enjoyed this lecture and be sure to keep up with the readings, but I'll see you for chapter 2. I hope you have a good day.